So welcome everybody to the next webinar in our series. Today we're going to be talking about using performance data to hone your job standards. So to get started, sorry about that. So to get started, I'd like to introduce who you guys are going to be hearing from. So my name is Stacy Pease. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at MachineMetrics, and I'm sure I've interacted with many of you. And also joining us today as our moderator is Cullen McClarty. Many of you also probably know Cullen, as Cullen manages our support system. So we'll be leading you through the webinar today, and we'll be available for questions as well. A couple of ground rules as we're kind of getting started. Sorry, back up here. Questions can be asked in the chat and will be answered either in the chat or at the end of the presentation. If for some reason we don't get to someone's question or something like that, we will follow up with you afterwards. The webinar is being recorded, and you'll be able to access and receive access to that recording via email and slides if you'd like. So if there's someone who wasn't able to join the webinar, don't worry about that. We'll be able to get them a recording of it. Okay. So our agenda for this session is to do a very brief overview of what MachineMetrics is, the challenges of job standards, and some of the issues that kind of go into creating them and maintaining them, how MachineMetrics captures production data. We're going to look at how you create a workflow that keeps your standards up to date within your organization. Then we're going to jump into the product and actually look at some of the reports that could be used to gain insight into your job standards. And then we're going to talk about some key takeaways and do a Q&A. So without further ado, let's jump in. So as most of you probably know, MachineMetrics is headquartered in Massachusetts. And we support over 100 customers globally with many different types of machine assets connected. And really, our role is to enable the digital factory. And we do that by collecting and analyzing data from the machines on your shop floor and actually empowering people to make faster and better decisions. And standards are certainly part of that. And so that's just kind of at a high level, a little bit about MachineMetrics. Certainly, if there's any more questions about MachineMetrics, please let us know. All right, so one of the things that is important to kind of think about is how do jobs standards get created and maintained within your organization today? And across our customers, we've seen that it can vary a little bit between manufacturers, but in general, the engineering and department creates the standards, especially in a business where you're quoting from a print or something like that. You create a standard, and then that standard essentially gets released to the shop floor. And the standard is really an educated guess based on everything that the engineer can see and what they anticipate. But then that standard gets out in the real shop floor, and the operators are actually running the job and trying to meet that standard. And so maintaining the standards can be quite challenging. And we've seen that across our customers that, many of them have standards, but what they'll tell you about their standards is that they are either inaccurate, they don't trust them, or that they know that there is a margin of error in their standards that ideally they'd be looking to take out of the mix so that they can have good standards in real time to drive their operations. So really, some of the key challenges around job standards, there's four, I would say, key components of job standards. There's the creation of them, and like we just talked about, that's typically done by the engineering department. Confirming those standards, which would be, you run the job and actually see how it ran, and you can monitor those standards over time to see, has the standard shifted over time, or if you're using different equipment, or say there was other changes that the customer or you had to make to the process. And then there's actually the process of updating. And so the creating of the standards and the updating of the standards will still reside with you on the shop floor side. And what MachineMetrics is able to do, and we'll be talking about how we're able to do this, we're able to help you confirm your standards and to monitor them over time to know when you need to do updating. And so really, these are the two places where the data sits, and that allows you to then create workflows around updating those standards. So why are standards important? And I think that for many of you on the shop floor, this is probably, you live this, so you know it quite well. But inaccurate standards lead to scheduling and planning problems. They lead to the inability to meet on-time deliveries. They lead to operators being frustrated because they have already seen that job can't meet the standard, but the standard doesn't get updated, and then they have to run it again with the wrong standard. And it can also lead to poor job costing and pricing. So it actually impacts the financials of your business. And so having good job standards really is the foundational layer that allows your manufacturing processes and the subsequent business outcomes, such as making your profit margins. It's really key to doing that well. And so that's really why we decided to focus on this webinar, is because we know that this is very important for shops and for their overall well-being. So really, the question you have to ask yourself is, what if there was a better way? And for all of you who are MachineMetrics customers, there is a better way. And that's using the performance data that's generated as your jobs run to then create a robust way to update your standards. So a little bit, just backing up a little bit into how MachineMetrics actually goes about collecting this data. So we are connected, and this is our larger architecture and ecosystem kind of view. But I want to just highlight that really we're connected directly to the machine controls. And many of you that have been through an integration are probably familiar with how your machines are integrated. But we are talking to the machine, and that's how we're able to collect the actuals. And then through the platform, the customers add in their job standards. So many of you have gone through that either through a CSV import or through an ERP integration, where your job standards are then brought into MachineMetrics. And so the combination of where you're starting from plus the real-time data that we're able to connect through our connectivity to the control is what is allowing you to get those actual job standards back out the other end and to put them to work for you. So it's important to note that in general, each of you is really on an analytics journey. And the analytics journey kind of moves along within here. And so when customers are starting, they're often looking at more of descriptive analytics, where they're looking at just what's happening. But really, and what we're talking about today is more in line with diagnostic analytics. This is why you're understanding why you're not meeting on-time deliveries, why a job is running longer than expected. And your job standards and being able to update them really sits within this part of the analytics journey, as we're going to be diving deeper into that. So although certainly descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive are also great, related to job standards, it's really about that diagnostic side. So, and it's also important to note that production reporting and optimizing cycle time standards is one of the foundational value propositions of MachineMetrics. And you can see some of the others that are here. But being able to understand and hone standards is really core to what we do, and is, again, why we're focusing on that topic today with you all. All right. So, in particular, we're going to be looking at the production report, and I'm going to be bringing you into a live demo of the production report momentarily. But the production report, the goal of this report is really that you're able to look at all of the jobs that ran in a given period of time, and then you can see things about their performance. And it's that data that we're going to be using as we talk about honing job standards. So we'll be getting deeper into this. Something that's worth noting in here is that there is a connection between job standards and OEE. Now, for those that may not be familiar with OEE, OEE is overall equipment effectiveness, and it is a metric that some of our customers use and some do not. But what's important to note is that OEE is made up of 3 components: availability, performance, and quality. And performance is actually a percentile of how well you are performing against your job standards. So even for customers that don't use OEE, there is value in this. And we're going to be looking at that today in a real production report, and I'll be showing you how you can use this metric to really help you flag suspect job standards and to know where you need to do updates. And then we can also, this also touches a little bit on configurable notifications as well. The ability to alert the right person at the right time that different things are happening. And we'll be talking about some of the future improvements that we're going to be adding to MachineMetrics and how that will tie to some of this job standards conversation as well. All right. So one thing that's important before we jump into the reports, because we're going to look at a subset of jobs, but I think it's important to go over what information is actually available from your job records. So you can see the expected setup and cycle times versus your actual run data for every job. You can see the actual cycle time for every single part that was produced. So say you have a run of 10,000 parts, each one of those parts will have a different cycle time, and we capture all of that. So it's not just an average across your run, you can actually get very granular as well. Mean and median cycle times for each job run and also the aggregates of your job runs. OEE and other performance metrics like that, like we were just looking at on the OEE report side. Downtime and reject reasons that are associated with job performance. And sometimes what you'll find is that, and we'll talk about this a little bit, that sometimes just because a standard doesn't look good, it can be related to something that happened during that particular run of the job. And so having this data in context with your actual run data helps you to know whether this is a one-off issue where you ran into an extraordinary problem, or whether this is more of a systemic issue because you've seen the same reject reasons over the last 3 runs, and it's because you can't make the part in the amount of time or things like that. You can edit standards in real time and historically within MachineMetrics. And then you can also look at historical job performance, which can be very helpful for things like quoting or re-quoting work or trying to understand you know, how you fared in the past on a job. And that can also help inform some job standards decisions. So the goal of all of this is really, come on, slide. There we go. Oh, we're going to jump in. Sorry. Okay. Let me back up here for just a moment. I thought I had one more slide, but I guess it's right after this one. So we'll jump into the demo at this point. No, I think I did miss a slide. I'm sorry. When I'm trying to advance the slides, it's giving me 2. All right, so backing up, why is this all really important? What it really comes down to is that businesses need a workflow around this. They need to be able to run a job with the current standards that are in place, use the reporting to flag those suspect standards, have someone within their organization determine if an update is actually warranted, and then to actually update those standards in their ERP and other systems. And I want to just really quickly touch on this one, engineering determining if an update is warranted. I put engineering because that's typically where we see standards being maintained is within engineering, although that may look different for your organization. So if it's a different department or a different title, just plug in the one that's appropriate for you. But the point of it is that you can't just, you could just pass through updates blindly. But a lot of the time, the run and what happened during the run actually determines whether the cycle time really needs to be updated. And also, most shops put some buffer time into their cycle times. And so you don't want to necessarily erode all of your buffer either. And so engineering or whatever department really serves as that gatekeeper so that the data is flagging that there's an issue, but someone is still needing to do some looking into it to determine whether it should really get updated, as opposed to us just pushing updates. All right, so now we are going to jump into the product. So let's take a look. So I'm going to bring us back to the home screen here. So I am in a demo account here, but it is a real customer. And so when you come into your dashboard, you'll be brought into the same place. So what you're going to want to do in here is you will want to head to reports. And then from reports, you're going to want to navigate to the production report, which happens to be the first report that you come to. So I'm going to do some filtering in here. Like all of our reports, there are filters. So the first thing is your shift filters. I'm going to leave on all the shifts, at least for the purposes of this, but certainly when you're using these reports, feel free to use those filters as you need to. I'm going to select this cell 1 group. And what I'm going to assume is that I'm a cell leader who's responsible for, I'm an engineer who's responsible for production on a cell of machines. And so I'm looking to see what yesterday's production looked like in my cell to understand if any of the jobs that ran may have suspect standards. So I'm going to select just that cell. And I'm going to hop in here to the date picker and select yesterday. And I'm going to let this run. Okay. So what we see here is that there are 3 jobs that fit the criteria that I've put in. And so you can see they all ran on different machines, and you can see some of the data. This is just the basic data that I pulled in from here, but know that you can always edit what data items you're able to see. Within here, there is a lot of data. So most customers pare this amount of data back a little bit to just the necessities for their business. So I went ahead and did that for this account, but know that what's important to you may look different than what I have here, and that's okay. But some things that I can see off of this, I can see, I pulled in utilization rate, I pulled in things like OEE and production efficiency, but you'll also see that I have that performance metric. Now that's the one that I said ties to OEE. Now, something that's very helpful to know about performance, and we'll dive deeper into this, but just from this view, I can tell a lot about the job standard without even seeing what the standard was versus the actual. So within performance, your goal is to have 100% performance, which means that you were dead accurate to your cycle time standard. And then if it creeps too high above 100%, it means that you're outperforming your standard. So you're actually planning too much time. And if you're significantly below 100% in your performance, it means that you're not planning enough time and that you're actually shortchanging the job. So what we can see here is these 3 jobs. I have one job that's at 101%. And we're going to go one click deeper, so we'll see kind of the cycle times that were expected. But I would expect when I go into this one that this standard is going to be accurate. I would expect that this standard is going to be too high and that this one is going to be too low. And I'm going to use this to then go deeper into the reports. So from here, I'm going to dive first into the one that I know is pretty accurate to its standard. So when you open up this report, this is now a more detailed view of this job that ran. I can see the job number, I can see how many parts ran, I can see the OEE plus the breakout, but down here I can see some other things. Now this particular job did not have a setup, but if a setup had happened, they would also be able to see setup analytics related to job standards. Some of you have setup standards and some of you have resident setups. So, setup will be relevant to businesses that have setup. But in this case, what I really want to hone in on is this expected cycle time versus the average in cycle time. So this average in cycle time is analogous to median cycle time. So what you have here is a standard of 45.3 seconds, and that on average, across the 1,683 parts they made, they were making these parts in 44.8 seconds. So this is an example of where they are very accurate to their standard. There is no need to update here. Their performance looks good. This all looks very the way I would expect for a job that has already had its standards confirmed. So in contrast with that, let's go back a click and let's go into one of the other jobs where the standard was not that way. So let's go into this job where the standard, where our performance number was well over 100%. So when I come into this job, we're going to go to the same place that we were before. And again, this job also did not have a setup time. You can see the number of parts they ran, but here's where we want to focus. They're planning a minute and 40, almost 46 seconds for cycle time. And on average, they're making the parts in 1 minute and 14 seconds. If they don't update this standard, they're off by, a good 30% on their standard, 40%. And so if they say they were running 10,000 pieces like this, they will wind up, basically finishing the job before it's supposed to be finished. Now, that can be, I guess, good in some ways, but what it tends to do is it backs up your production schedule, because then the next job may not be available to run yet. And so having this standard be more accurate, maybe adjusting the standard to 1 minute and 20 seconds or 1 minute and 25 seconds would help them shave that 20 seconds off of their expected cycle time. And let's say that they quote this part. That 20 seconds of cycle time adds cost to the part. And so this allows them to cost their parts more accurately, as well as to have real numbers that they can update from. Now, one other thing that I want to just show really quickly is from here, if I click down here, I can get to some additional information. These 3 little dots that are here, I can actually go into what's called the cycles report. And that's going to show me the cycle times for all 996 parts. So in here, I can see every part that was produced and its timestamp. I can see the duration of the run. And if I go all the way to the bottom, I can see the total number of parts, the median cycle time, the mean cycle time, as well as the standard deviation. And these statistics can also be helpful in helping engineering know whether they really need to update a standard or if they actually don't need to do that. Okay, so I'm going to head back into the presentation at this point. Sorry about that. Go. All right, so some key takeaways from this. Cycle times require confirmation and maintenance. Putting them out on your shop floor without a confirmation and maintenance process will lead to poor production planning and have other impacts on your business. So this is a really important thing to consider for your organization. Actual cycle times are captured for every job that runs. So you have all of the data within MachineMetrics already to be able to actually do this. And you need to create a job standards workflow to ensure that suspect standards are reviewed and updated. And that can look like that workflow slide that I showed earlier, where you have someone in your organization looking at those reports on a regular basis and then making the decision of whether your job standards do need to be updated. All right. And in terms of the future, a future enhancement that we will be adding into our product is the ability to drive action from this. So what you will be able to do is actually assign an incident to an engineer or to whatever department within your organization is correct when a job standard varies more than a set percentage from standard. So that will allow our customers to say, I want to flag anytime a job standard is more than 20% variation, and you won't even have to go into the reports. It will automatically text or email. And so this driving of action is really what we're working on enhancing on our end to make job standard updates even more easy than being able to look at the reporting side. All right. So now that I've kind of gone through everything, I'm going to turn things over to Cullen so we can do a little bit of Q&A.
All right. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I got a couple of questions here. I'll go ahead and get us started with the first one. So we talked a lot about job standards, and this one was just a quick question about whether we have anything for setup standards.
Yes, so I mentioned it just briefly when we were going through the slides, and the the demo jobs that I was looking at didn't have setup associated. But for those of you that have imported job standards into MachineMetrics, you know that your setup standard gets imported as well as your job standard. So it's basically the same process. If you have a setup standard, say a 2-hour standard, you will get out the other end that it really took 2 hours and 15 minutes. And you can use almost the exact same process to update setup standards as you would do for cycle time standards. And again, setup standards have similar impacts on the business to job standards, in the sense that if you don't plan enough time or enough expertise within them, then setups can take longer, which can lead to delays in manufacturing. And also, a lot of the cost of a job is in the setup, because that setup gets amortized over all the parts that get produced. And so being able to control those setup times is another piece of cost control as well.
Great, okay. So next question we've got is, we looked at some jobs you had set up that already had cycle times, but this person was asking, what if they're not actually starting from any kind of good standards to even start from?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would say is something that a lot of shops struggle with, is they don't feel like the standards that are in their ERP are accurate. So they feel like, how do I even get this started? And then we even have some customers that where their standards are really not in an ERP, or where they don't have standards. In particular, setup standards. Job standards most people have, but setup standards, it's not uncommon for people to not have them. So the good news, though, is that when you create jobs in MachineMetrics, you can put in for those values really any value. So when I've worked with customers before that didn't have job standards or setup standards, what we would do is we would take an educated guess. So maybe we'd say, okay, we're going to start with the basic presumption that all of your setups are 2 hours. Then as the jobs run, we will refine those standards. So job A actually took 1.5 hours, job B took 3 hours. And so the next time the job runs, it's not wrong a second time, or on an ongoing basis. And so in the case where you don't have good standards to start from, you kind of have to understand that it's going to take time to get all of your standards up to date, but it's about biting it off in little pieces, knowing where to get started, and starting to use the data that's being collected to build out those standards more robustly for yourself.
Great. Okay, so we got one more question here, which is kind of related to that one, which is, if you know that their cycles, they're asking if they know their cycles are wrong, how is that going to affect MachineMetrics, the data they're getting out of MachineMetrics, and can they still kind of use this if they know they have bad cycle time standards?
Yeah, that's a good question. So on our end, whether the standard is right or wrong doesn't impact the functionality of how MachineMetrics captures your real cycle times. So the starting place and the accuracy of it doesn't impact the end result of how the data is captured and getting accurate cycle times out the other end. The only impact it has when you have incorrect standards is from the operator view. When they're looking at things like their parts goal wheel or things like that, it's going to be calculated off of that incorrect standard. So it's important, if you know you have inaccurate standards, to make sure that you're transparent with your operators about the project to enhance your standards, so that they understand that when they're seeing things that are erroneous, it may be because of those bad standards. And so I think it's important that would be the only real impact, is just what the operator views the first time they run that job with the wrong standard. It's going to be prompting them or showing that the job performance is not great, but it's about helping that operator understand that they've got to go through that once, so that then you can get the actuals out the other end and enhance that standard, so that the next time all the reporting can be accurate.
Great. Okay, so another one for you. So customer asking if, so they're having a hard time tracking how much setup time they have associated with someone actually working on the machine versus how much time they're waiting for the part to be signed off from quality. And how would you recommend using MachineMetrics to kind of go about addressing this?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting one. One thing that can be done is, specifically around setup, We have some special features called setup stages, which allow you to break a setup into some functional buckets. So for instance, like I'm going to tear down the machine, I'm going to set tools, I'm going to run a first piece, I'm going to inspect the first piece. So when customers have that challenge of they know that it's not the overall setup, but they have particular bottlenecks within the setup, and quality tends to be that, especially in businesses where the parts need intensive inspection. So what you can actually do is you can trigger notifications off of the job entering into different parts of the setup stage. So for instance, if you had a setup stage called first piece inspection, you can actually have that automatically trigger a notification to quality. So that quality is getting the notification the part is ready from the time that it is literally ready. And then that would allow you to be able to track that stage better, but also making sure that the right person is aware that that part is ready. So it's not a delay due to lack of knowing that the part is ready, but rather more delay waiting for the equipment or things like that. So the operator's not having to hunt down a quality person or any of those types of activities. They can really alert the right person at the right time. And so for customers like that, setup stages is really a great tool, and they would really recommend you talking more with your customer success manager or offline with Cullen or I, about that, because that feature can be extremely powerful for businesses where they have bottlenecks within their setups.
Great. All right. Well, those are going to be all the questions we're answering live today. If you have any open questions, we are going to be following up with you afterward on those. But that's going to be it for our Q&A portion.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. I hope that this was helpful and informative around honing your job standards using performance data. As we mentioned before, we did record this session, so we will be, if you want access to it, please let us know. Also, after this, you're going to receive a survey that's going to just have a few quick questions for you about the webinar, and really helps us just plan great content moving forward in our webinar series. So we just kindly ask that you take a couple of minutes to do the survey for us, because it really does help us make sure that we're providing good content. So thank you guys so very much. And please consider, how to really apply this in your business. And if you're doing parts of what we talked about today and maybe haven't gotten to the point of creating a workflow, those are great things to bring to your CSM and to allow them to help give you guys even some further support to actually build out all of this for yourselves. So thank you all so much. Have a great rest of the day, and we look forward to you guys joining us on a future webinar.